Good morning, everybody. How you doing today? Welcome to the Monday version of the show. Hopefully we can get your week started out right, get things going down the right path. Let me switch my screens up here. Welcome to Break the Cycle with DSD. I am your host. I am not a therapist nor an attorney. I'm an individual much like you who has been through a rough experience. Had to develop some tips and techniques along the way that I share with you to hopefully help you get your life back, get things back on track. And if you have kids, repair, rebuild, strengthen the relationship with them, and just minimize the damage that a toxic ex can do. Remember, only a licensed professional can diagnose somebody with a personality disorder, so just be careful throwing around terms because it can ultimately hurt you and hurt your own credibility. And as I often say, the one thing that we really have going for us is our credibility, and we don't want to just give that away. So be careful how you communicate things. Obviously, learn about personality disorders, understand what it looks like, and the techniques to deal with that. But you don't need to go around telling everybody that you have figured out what your ex is. If you like what's going on here and you want to support, please subscribe and ring the bell notification. But you can go a step further and become a channel member, which gives you special badges, custom emojis, your name, listening credits, and access to member-only events. And there is one coming up on, I think it's Saturday. I'll have to check the dates and times. I'll be posting more about that in the community tab. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to get a text notification when the show goes live, you can text DSDLIVE to 844-598-0012. 844-598-0012. That will put you on the list for the text notification where you'll get a link. And if you want to call into today's show, you can do that by dialing 1-424-373-5483, 1-424-DSD-LIVE. And for people outside of the United States, or if you don't want to use your phone, there's a web interface, and the link is listed in the link below. I think that's fixed, but maybe it's not. We'll have to double check. So on that, hopefully you guys are doing outstanding today. I'm doing all right. I'm a little still trying to wake up. Got my coffee. Messed up and didn't completely come up with a topic today, so we'll have to roll with that, which I think will be okay. I'm trying to redesign my process for how I set things up, and hopefully that will get, hopefully as time goes on, that'll get better. Uh-oh, I had the wrong screen up here. Let me get this back on track. Anyways, I like what John says here. He says, you are starting to recover when you can joke about it at least once in a while. That is true. And it's funny you say that because I remember a friend of mine used to tell me that the stuff that his ex was doing was actually kind of funny. And when he would tell me what it was, I'm like, that's not funny. I don't know what's going on. And I would just be like, that's not funny. That's absolutely not funny. I'm like, this will never be funny. It's kind of the way I was looking at it. But I can see now with time that there was a lot of truth to what he was saying. So the only thing I would say on that is if you're not there yet, if you're at the point where you're thinking, no, I can't laugh at any of this. This isn't funny. This isn't entertaining or anything like that. Give yourself some time. I was there with you on that. I did not think that this would ever be, I never believed that I would be where I am emotionally today. To be honest, when I started this channel 4 years ago, I was at a certain place and I thought that was the best it was going to get. And it was pretty good in my mind. And 4 years later, I'm in a position that is just tremendously better than emotionally. Now, if we talk about other issues, finances and retirement and, future stability, maybe I'm not doing so great in those areas, but emotionally, I'm doing pretty good. And really the key on that, for me at least, is you have to get to the point where you just say, okay, I can continue to be angry and mad and bitter at the injustice of this all, of how this is all played out. And every one of you has every right to feel angry and bitter. But the reality is, it's not getting you anywhere. Was not getting me anywhere. It was keeping me stuck and attached to the ex, attached to what was going on. It was keeping me thinking and ruminating about everything that had happened. It's like I got coffee all over my hands. And I just had to one day get up and say, okay, I can choose to continue to think and feel this way. And if I do, and I have every right to feel all those emotions, and I do, and I did, I could see the path it was taking me, and I understood that it would systematically destroy any chance for any happiness that I would ever have in my life. And in that moment, I had the realization or the epiphany that in effect, that would mean that I would basically be letting the ex win forever. A lot of people say, I'm trying to think what that comment is that a lot of people say. It's revenge is living a good life and showing them that they don't mean anything to you and all those things. And there's truth in that. But when you're doing it to hurt the other person or to prove the other person wrong, you're still connected to them. The reality. The trick is, I'll just go back to trick. The trick is when you release that and you're like, look, I'm going to have a good life in spite of this other person, and I don't care. If they're jealous of me, I don't care. If they're not jealous of me, I don't care. If they go along and crash and burn, I don't care. Okay, maybe it might be gift with purchase. But in the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And if they go on and have a great life, you don't care. You have to detach from that person. And that is really one of the first key steps of getting your life back, of minimizing their hold on your life. Now, I understand that somebody who's dealing in the beginning parts of this, and you're like, well, Duane, you don't understand. I haven't seen my kids in 6 months. I'm living in my car. And those situations are true and they're painful in the moment. And again, it gets to the point where you can choose to go down the pit of hell, or you can change. I have a friend of mine who I actually met through this channel. He doesn't really watch anymore because he doesn't need it. But that's pretty much what happened to him. He got blindsided by the destruction of his relationship, lost everything, was homeless, was living in his car. Everything was going to crap. Now, a few years later, he's just sold his house that he had bought after the divorce, buying another house, has a good job, is a key, is a key person in his kids' lives, and things tend to turn around. Now, had he decided to just stay in that angry and bitter mode, there's a good possibility that he could probably still be living in his car and not being in his kids' lives. And it's just, a lot of it has to depend on how we decide to go forward. None of this is easy. And a lot of times we're fighting against ourselves to figure out the best way to go forward. This was hard for me. I'll tell you, I grew up with watching my dad be an angry, bitter person. Watch how it corrupted a lot of his life. I saw it. When I was going through my situation, I'm like, I don't want to be that person. Even though I knew, even though I could see where the path I was going, I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't just say, I couldn't just get up one day and say, okay, I married a person that wasn't so great. A person that's really run me through the ringer for 20 years and has just destroyed every aspect of my life and my future. It was incredibly difficult for me to make peace with all of that. It's going to be incredibly difficult for you to make peace with all of that. Give yourself the time to do it. My hope is that you can look at my story or listen to what I just said and say, okay, I believe that this guy that's talking right now was where I am today, and I see that he's been able to get to the other path, and that means I can get there as well. Anyways, so I guess that'll wrap up that rant. Let's see, I'm going to look through the comments here real quick. Brian says, I use a body cam to record interactions with the ex. It is bulky though. Any recommendations on more subtle video recording tech to be in front of a small child? One, I just want to say, make sure that the area you're in, that it's legal to do. Just, you don't want to get yourself into any extra problems. The next part about that is I would look for surveillance type stuff. If you want to record, but you want it to be kind of subtle, it depends on what you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to like be, what's the word I'm looking for? If you want the other person to know that you're recording, then your phone is probably a good idea, or a GoPro or something like that. But you're right. Those are all very obvious of what you're doing. If you're going to be doing it more stealthily, then just look for, little pin cameras and stuff like that. Again, just be very cautious that if you're doing that you legally can do it, because the last thing you want is to get caught doing something that potentially could be a felony in your state or your area, depending on where you're at. And then you're dealing with that. So just be careful. Let's see. I have no idea what that means, so I'm not going to pull that up. Chaco says, I'm focusing on my kids and my time with them. Obviously, the ex always uses the kids to get to me. They are absolutely going to do that. You guys all need to prepare yourself for that. Anyone who's been on the channel for a while, this is going to be old. You're already going to know this, but for anybody who happens to be new and hasn't heard this come up, the reality is whenever you start to set up boundaries with your ex to where they're not able to get to you the way they used to, they're not able to take their bony little finger and go boop right in your eye, they inevitably change up their tactics to different things. Typically, that means they'll ramp up all the direct stuff. Once that isn't working, are not getting the desired result, then they inevitably switch to the kids. Then they start basically trying to triangulate through the children. So unfortunately, that's what happens. Expect it, prepare yourself for it so it doesn't freak you out. It completely caught me off guard. I was like, oh my God, how in the world? I remember way back when it's like, okay, I got to set up good boundaries. So I set up good boundaries with the ex. I'm like, oh, her spears are being thrown and they're just bouncing off. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I can't believe this. This is outstanding. And then shortly afterwards, it pivoted and the kids were just getting hammered. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I took the bait on it. The first time that happened, I'm like, how dare you? How dare you do that? Big long email, all the information to say why that was a horrible thing to do. Accomplished nothing. No, let me back up. It accomplished nothing for me. It absolutely accomplished something for her because she got the reaction. I reacted to the situation, which is what they want, which is really frustrating. Remember, that's what they mainly go for. They're going for the reactions. Let's see here. Oh, I love this. John, I clicked. Sorry about that. Says, you hear the saying all the time, quote, the best revenge to the ex is to let them see you living a great life. But John says, I disagree. The best revenge is not thinking about revenge and just living your life. That right there, John, you have it. That is the secret. You do that, and their ability to touch and get to you almost just goes away. Not completely. They're always going to try, but that right there, I love that. Thank you for posting that. I appreciate that. Let's see. iTumblers, it said, for your pro se listeners, I can't even pronounce that name. Your state, divorce, alimony, and child custody. This will help you understand the state laws for family court. I don't know if that made any sense because I'm actually kind of confused on it, but. GA says 24 months without daughter. I think the long-term battle will be in my favor. Short term, do miss her. I've made peace though, focus on myself now. Guys, that's exactly what you have to do. They're going to try to use that time to sever your relationship and break your resolve, break your perseverance, get you to give up and agree to something because you're so devastated by this that you're like, well, I won't wait and fight for what I think is a better scenario. I'm just going to give up. And guys, I'll tell you, the second that you agree to something and it goes on paper and the judge stamps it, it makes it so much harder if you go back later and go, oh, wait a minute, this isn't working. This is, the ex is toxic and you're hosed. Because it's like, well, they're going to try to spin it that it's money. You're only trying to change it because of money. There's no real change of circumstances. This has been working, and all that stuff. And then you're behind the power curve. Your best bet is to fight the fight and try to get the best outcome for you. Now, to be fair, if you made, like in this situation, if GA made peace with it and he's like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm good. If you decide you're good with every other weekend or standard visitation or whatever the heck it is, and you make that decision and you're like, you know what? I've made peace. I'm focusing on my own life. This is a way I can still be, if you make what am I trying to say? If you ultimately decide to make the decision to compromise and it's the right decision for you and you're doing it for the right reasons, you're good to go. But don't do it out of fear and panic. The difference on that is if you're at that mode where you're making a compromise decision, but if you're like, okay, I'm piecing everything together and this is the best decision for me and my kid, well, that's a different story. I don't know if I even needed to say that. I just wanted to throw it out there because the reason I say that is you often get to the situation to where you second guess everything. And maybe your gut's telling you to do something, but you've been through the ringer so much that you just don't, you don't trust yourself anymore. So maybe you're thinking like, okay, this is the decision, but everyone's telling me I shouldn't do it. At the end of the day, you have to do what's right for you. And as long as that decision is right for you, and 5 years from now, you'll be okay with that decision, then you're good to go. Looks like I have a caller, so I'm going to try to go to that. Area code 509. Hello, and welcome to the show.
Hey, buddy. How you doing, Duane?
Good. How you doing today?
No, I'm doing okay, man. I'm doing okay. It's been a little rough, but no, man, I just wanted to thank you for your show and just wanted to touch base on something that you just said. I did get a court order that's finally stand by a judge. I'm still feeling hosed, and it sounds like modification sounds like it's a little bit harder to do. But no, man, it's just been tough because now I have a 2-year-old boy that I've been fighting for, and the ex just basically wants me out of the picture. But I've been fighting for the last 18 months, and COVID put a 6-month hold on court. So
yeah,
we finally went to court a couple weeks ago. I'm getting an overnight every week plus a second one every other week. And my son's going to turn 3 here in February, but I'm not allowed 2 overnights until June of next year. So I guess, and the toughest part is that, just yesterday morning, I found out that my ex has already moved on and already got a new boyfriend and took him to a program that I've got our kid involved in. And this is her first time taking him, and she shows up with her new boyfriend and just, it's been tough. Like, what's modification looking like? How can I go back to court and get more time and ask for more time? It makes it sound like modification is tough to do, but how tough is it, Duane?
Well, it depends on what the reasons are and why it was set up. Now, if your initial thing was set up because your child's really young, and a lot of places will be that's why it's really tough whenever you have a kid that's not in school, because typically the kid's with a mom, a stay-at-home mom, that whole story. I don't know if that's what your situation is. So it makes it more complicated, because if you go in and you're like, well, I want to be able to see my kid too, but I work and I'm going to have to put him in daycare, then it's a harder argument. Doesn't mean you can't do it. There's been people in, I think the last gentleman that called in is in California, and he was able to get 50-50 custody with like a 1 or 2-year-old, which is kind of surprising. It's not necessarily impossible.
Wow, yeah.
It's just tougher. One aspect of it that is to your advantage is the change of circumstances. Is as your child gets older, you can say, well, that's the change. Well, now they're in school, or before they were constantly, or mom was a stay-at-home mom, wasn't working, but now the kid's in daycare, that type of thing. So it depends on what the nuances are. Your best bet, obviously, would be to discuss it with an attorney who is familiar with your area and the judges and understand how they normally look at things, and then make a decision based on that. If you're just, see, the problem is if you went right now, if you looked at it and you said, okay, I'm going to go back now for a modification, it is absolutely going to look like you've seen that she's moved on, she's with a new guy, and it's bothering you, and the only way to punish her is to try to take the kid for more time. If you walk into court where that is the perception, or that's the way they think, you're not going to do very well. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, that's understandable. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out, our child is in daycare, and the crazy thing is one of my overnights, for example, I'll get him on a Monday, and then the court order stipulated that I take him to daycare for 3 hours so they have some sort of curriculum that they feel is more important than bonding time with the father. Now, that was part of the court order, too. So that's something that I didn't agree with. And that's what, I have a completely day off, but I'm still required to take him to daycare, which makes no sense to me because I'm a willing and fit father, have the day off. I can spend the entire day with the kid, and it just, that was difficult to swallow. The fact that I had to take him to daycare for 3 hours and then I can pick him up later in the day, but I still have to return him to mom. And so that was the other thing that I was going to talk to you guys about. Like, how is it that I was stipulated to take him to daycare on a day that I could have a full day with him? And so those are small things that I wanted to go back and modify with this. And the judge that I have retires at the end of the year, so I thought maybe I'd have a better shot in front of a different judge. But it's just so new, so fresh, so I didn't know what the obstacles I was going to have to face and what kind of evidence I needed to provide to show a change of circumstance. enough for me to get him more time.
Well, if you wanted to go back and say, hey, look, the court order says I have to take him to daycare, but that's my day off. I want to spend, I want to get it modified to say that I can spend that entire time with him. Then, I mean, you can, here's the reality, right? Whatever you decide to fight, you have to be prepared to lose. And what I mean, and the reason I say that is because if you go in and you swing for the fences and they knock everything down and it destroys you emotionally, then it's not worth the risk. If you can go in and fight it, and if they say no, and they could be thinking, all right, well, what we're doing here is we're establishing that dad can get the kid to a place on time and follow it. So obviously when it rolls into school, that would make sense. I mean, you don't necessarily know what they're trying to do. I understand how you feel, because I'd feel the same way. It's like, wait a minute, I'm limited on time. I only get them for a few hours. And 50 to 75% of the time I have my child is I have to drop them off with someone else and I can't hang out there. Well, that's a problem. I mean, it feels like a problem. So I understand where you're at. It's just, the problem is whenever we agree to things and we sign it and stamp it, that's the letter of the law. And when you start modifying, now if you have an ex that you can negotiate with or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, that's not a problem, and that you can trust, that's one thing. Whenever you're dealing with somebody that you can't, what I'm saying on this is that even if you were able to talk to your ex and they're like, oh yeah, that's no problem. I don't care. Of course you should be able to spend time with little Johnny. And then later they take you back to court for something. And the first thing they're going to say is, well, he can't even follow a court order. He can't even do something as simple as drop the kid off for daycare for 3 hours. You know what I'm saying? You just have to be really careful, because if you can't trust somebody, they will use everything against you.
And that's where I'm at. I mean, my ex, she's fighting tooth and nail to limit my time. And that's the hard part for me to swallow too. Like the other day, she showed up to this program, and first time she shows up, all the parents and family and the kids know me because I've been taking them consistently. And then the first time she shows up, everyone's probably thinking, who the hell is this lady? And then who the hell is this guy? Yeah. And what bothered me the most too is, she's restricting my time, but yet this new boyfriend has unlimited, unrestricted time with my boy. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I'm the biological father here. Why shouldn't I have this time?
Because unfortunately, I know, dude. And the problem is that, and this is where the black hole thinking video, which I don't know if you've seen that I talk about, is that whatever it is, 80-20, 10-8, 90-10, whatever the timeshare is, for the most part, whenever you have the kid, you can do whatever the hell you want, unless it's written in court that you have to do certain things, like in your situation. But at the same time, she can do whatever she wants. If she wants to bring a new guy over every freaking week, she can do it. Not a damn thing you can do about it. And sitting there and getting irritated about it isn't going to help you. Now, as I was talking about earlier at the start of this show, you're absolutely right in the way you feel. I'm not saying that anger and that frustration and that bitterness is not legitimate. It absolutely is. But at the same time, it's not going to accomplish anything for you, right? I mean, if you're sitting there going, this guy who I don't know is now spending more time with my kid than I get to spend with you're right. And to feel that way, I mean, I'm cautious to even say that, because I'm sure as I'm saying that, it's probably irritating you. But I mean, it's the reality that we get stuck in on this. I mean, if do you have an attorney, or are you pro se?
I have an attorney.
I would double check with them and say, hey, look, I'm wanting, how can I get a little bit more time, or how can I start to get more fair time, and see what their course of action is. I mean, and the sad part is if they turn around and they say, hey man, I told you that, this is all you would have gotten if we would have went to trial. So you settled on it. And I mean, maybe they'll say that, I don't know. The problem is that oftentimes attorneys, they look for the path of least resistance. And sometimes I think they throw things out there saying, hey, what do you think? This is the deal. This is probably a pretty good deal. And if you go, okay, then they're like, oh, all right, cool. The client agrees, stamp, done. Here's the final check, be done with it. You have to really question things sometimes. So, I mean, how long ago did you agree to this court order?
It was about like 2.5 weeks ago.
Oh my God. So you just signed it? I mean, is it temporary or is it permanent?
I believe it's permanent, you know, and here's the sad part. Well, I was supposed to be in trial back in March. COVID hit and we had a reset. We didn't have a date until October. And now we went to court, and the weird thing is it was supposed to be a trial. The judge did not want to hear a lick of evidence on either side. Basically, he took both attorneys into the chambers and like basically forced them to settle on the deal. And it was the weird thing is the attorneys were just running back and forth between the chambers and the clients. And then after 6 hours of that, I mean, that's what the court order, I mean, that's where we're at. And but I kind of want to go, but this judge retires at the end of the year, and I wanted to go back and get in front of a new judge and be like, hey, I did not get a fair trial. He did not listen to any evidence. No, I had all the evidence that I needed to show. I mean, I got video of my little boy like, crying when it's time to leave, and he does not want to leave. And that's why I'm like real bothered and real hurt, because this guy just didn't want to listen to anything.
The problem is going to be, let me just cut you off right there. The problem will be the way, and I'm not an attorney, right? So this is my understanding. So you'll have to double check. For you to say that and go back in, the first thing that judge is going to say is, were you represented? You'll say yes. And it's like, you had legal counsel and you agreed to this. You know, I mean, even if you're browbeat into something, if you sign it and you say, okay, I agree to this, this is the agreement, you're setting here, it makes it a lot more complicated. Because now going in and saying that is not, I don't think that's, I mean, you double check with your attorney. And since basically it would show badly on them that they didn't advise you appropriately or communicate the risk appropriately, I doubt he's going to be super on board in doing that. But you need to just double check what your options are. But that's the problem. That's where people get into trouble whenever you have an agreement and you go back to try to change it, because it's like, well, why are you trying to change this? You guys agreed to this. Well, because of this and that, right? I mean, and it's what you would almost need is to say, hey, look, there's things in the court order that the ex isn't following. They're supposed to share information. They're not doing it. So I want to, there's a contempt, you're going back for contempt. To go back and say that you were browbeat into making an agreement without a trial is risky. Not to say that you can't, but you need to understand that if you do that, that now you have to argue why you're going to try to change things. Again, I'm not an attorney, so this isn't my area of expertise. My thing is the emotional side of it, which goes back to what I was just talking about, is you have to decide, if you open Pandora's box on this and try what you're talking about and you completely get shut down, are you emotionally going to be better off than if you don't do anything? And sometimes going, swinging for the fences, so to speak, and coming up short is better than sitting there questioning if you should have done it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
and that's exactly what I've been contemplating.
Right.
You're exactly right. Is it worth the fight, or do I stand on the sideline and regret not fighting? Right.
But don't do anything. Don't rush in. Don't rush into it, because you need to really think this through. It's so easy to get emotionally wrapped into it and react to it emotionally, as opposed to thinking of it strategically and what the best course of action is. Does that make sense?
Right. No, and putting emotion aside,
right.
And it's just, I think the craft part, it's tough, because I don't think I'll be happy until I get 50-50.
Right.
And the fact that we were forced, I feel like I got doing a lot of forced to settle, and she still walked away with a lot of control and power. Now, let me ask you this though. You talk to a lot of people, you're familiar with family law and situations of other parents. let me ask you this. The boy is young, and my visitation consists of one overnight a week. So I pick him up 8:30 in the morning and return him the next day at 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
And then I get a third point of contact later in the week for about 3.5 hours. Knowing that that's my visitation, how fair is that? Am I getting the proper? Am I getting enough visitation? Or am I being just feeling like? Am I feeling victimized, or is that actually
the problem is the age. And that's probably the way you were hosed on this. And I don't know what state you're in and how they lean towards it, but that creates more of a problem when you're talking about a young kid. Standard would be the 80-20, which is every other weekend, right? Where every other weekend you would have your kid. But the problem is at 3 years old, I don't know what your age is. I mean, if this is your first kid,
he's 2.
Say again.
He's 2 years old, and it is my first kid.
Yeah, I mean, so it's what I'm saying, and my point was that let's say you're in your early 20s, it's your first kid, as opposed to you've had 5 other kids, or let's say you run your own daycare. I mean, you have a tremendous amount of experience in childhood development and know how to take care. You know what I mean? It's not apples to apples. So a lot of times they will be able to use that against you for that, to say, well, how are you going to be able to take care of a 2-year-old? I mean, there's all kinds of, is the ex breastfeeding, all those type of things. So it creates a whole nother layer of complexes. Gosh darn it, I can't say that word today. Whole nother layer of problems. I'll say it that way. Complexity is what I was trying to say. Anyways. So, I mean, is it fair? No, it's not fair. No, it's not. I mean, you're right to feel irritated by it. But I mean, the flip side to it is in your area, in your jurisdiction, and your area of family court, what do they lean toward? I mean, is there a precedence where a late 20s or something gets 50-50 custody of a 2-year-old? If the answer is yes, then absolutely you got hosed. If the answer is, I mean, maybe on the flip side, maybe it's that you get no overnights because they're scared of how you would be able to deal with a 2-year-old. So, I mean, it really depends on the area. I mean, what would have been better is if you would have had an agreement that said, okay, fine, we're going to deal with this. And then when the kid starts kindergarten, we switch it to more time, have something in there for more time, as opposed to having to go back to modify a court order.
Well, what I got was an overnight once a week, a second overnight every other week, and then in June I go back and get 2 overnights a week. I don't know why June was picked. I really don't. I don't know why. Because my son's going to turn 3 here in the next few months.
Dude, it's probably because normally what happens is in these type of situations, the ex likes to think that they have control. So if they go, well, we're doing this on a trial basis, and then in June, if you don't, do something horrible, then you get more. I mean, in my situation, when the custody evaluation came back and said 50-50, the ex, the way they were trying to spin it is, oh, well, on a trial basis, we're going to try 50-50. I'm like, hell, what? Nuh-uh. It kind of irritated me. But just remember, that's the type of mentality you're dealing with, especially if it's somebody who's toxic. They're going to be like, well, I mean, for the safety of my child, Billy only gets 1 overnight. And then once he proves he can do that until, by June of next year, then it'll be more. It's all smoke and mirrors. But I'm glad to hear that you already have it written in that at a time it changes. So that's good.
Yeah,
wow, we're going to have to wrap this up. One more question, man. You've been on for almost 20 minutes. I just looked down at the clock.
Oh, okay, my next question is, what do I have to do? What's the process that I have to do to set myself up correctly to go in and ask more time? What evidence do I need to provide? What do I need to do to expand my parenting time?
You just need to, with the time you have now, you need to demonstrate that there's no problems. What you have to make sure of is that your ex doesn't turn around and come back and say, well, on the days that my ex has little Timmy, I keep changing names, sorry, but he has a rash because the diaper's not being changed appropriately, or he's super hungry because he's not being fed, or you gave him something they were allergic to and they had a medical emergency or something. It's to basically demonstrate the time that you have that you're able to do it without issue, and realize that more than likely, depending on how your ex is looking at it, they're going to try to demonstrate that you can't handle the time you have. You just have to demonstrate that you can. It. I mean, the flip side to it, evidence-wise, I mean, if you had something that she was doing wrong, I mean, on the flip side, yours would be, is she following the court order? Is she doing everything that she's supposed to do as it pertains to sharing information if it's written in there? If it's not written in there, then there's nothing that, then she's not required to tell you diddly squat. That would be the thing, is if you walked in and said, hey, look, we've been doing this for 6 months, 7 months, what, a year. Here's a laundry list of violations of the court order that she hasn't followed it, and it's a problem, and this is what I'm having to do as a result of it. That's where the evidence would go in your favor. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And so to go back to what you're saying is to prove that I can take care of my son. I've been doing just that. I mean, I log everything, take pictures of everything. Yep. The problem that I'm facing is she's claiming that every time, the day after he leaves my home, he displays aggressive behavior, and she even has a daycare provider that can testify to that if need be. And it just blows my mind because. Well, I mean, but the thing is on that.
Yeah, but the thing on that is that's typical behavior. I mean, even with what you were talking about with your son being really sad to switch houses, that unfortunately is typical behavior, right? That's not indicative that, oh my God, the kid really wants to be with me more than mom, or vice versa. But everyone gravitates towards that to try to say, see, look. But I mean, this is incredibly stressful for a child. And the sad part, I mean, it's like, unfortunately, because of these situations, we're not afforded the opportunity to do something different. We are stuck in this mode, and we have to it's a crap situation, and our children are going to be affected by it. We just have to do the best we can. I mean, that's not a great answer, but that is the answer. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I continue to prove to my son that I can handle him, and continue to prove to the world that I can handle him. But we have zero contact. So she doesn't tell me about his behaviors or nothing like that, but just shows up to court and said, oh, he's so aggressive after he stays with his father, and showing, radical behavioral changes, this and that, blah, blah, blah. But I have no way of proving that false, because she's got that daycare provider wrapped around her finger. And I can sit there and say, you know what? I don't teach him violence. I don't let him watch anything that consists of any violence or anything like that. The child's too, of course not. But that's her argument every time, and it's been like that. And then to go back to what you're saying about information, providing information, what's strange to me is that every time we went to mediation, or anytime we went to co-parenting counseling, and every time we've been in front of a judge, she's always made a point that, hey, I better tell her who I'm hanging around with, who my roommates are, if I'm living with anybody, if I'm introducing our son to anybody else. And that was part of the court order. But yet she showed up the other day with a new boyfriend and didn't tell me anything of who she's introducing her child to, our child to. And I don't know who this guy is, and this and that, blah, blah, blah. But yesterday morning I had to learn that, there's this new guy. But yet in the court order, she requires me to tell.
Dude, if you put it in, here, man, let me just stop for a second. If you sign the court order and it says you're required to tell her that, and she is not required to tell you that, you're screwed. You're screwed. And there's nothing, if it's not reciprocated in that court order, there's nothing you can say about it. If it says in the court order that she has to tell you, well, then she's doing something wrong. But if you signed saying you have to tell her if you decide to date somebody, then that's what you agree to. Wow. Dude, you might want to try. Honestly, you might want to look at a different attorney and then see what your options are. I'm sorry,
you think
dude.
So?
Yeah. I mean, but see, the problem is if you agreed to all of it, you're kind of hosed. You know, I mean, so you need to have a conversation with your attorney, and then you probably should get a second opinion and go to someone else, hopefully somebody that has been recommended, and say, hey, look, this is my situation. I'm thinking I made a mistake here. What are my options? And see what they say. But I mean,
Thank God. I'm still in an uphill battle, ain't I?
yeah. Once you sign that, you created a whole bunch of extra problems for yourself. So, I mean, and I'm not trying to rain on your parade or try to whatever. I mean, this is your situation. You got to figure out what it is and then look at it and see what your best way forward is. So you need to have some conversations with your attorney and and probably get at least a second opinion. And then maybe you can call back and give us an update on where you're at. All right.
All right, buddy. You're breaking my heart, guy, but I appreciate what you do.
All right. Sorry, man. Oh my God. Okay. So guys, you have to read the damn order. Don't sign anything if you're not ready for it. Or if you sign it and you're like, okay, I'm hosed. I'm at my wit's end. I can't do anything else. And this is the best I can do. But if you sign something like what he was talking about, I mean, he's basically given all the power to the ex. He's set himself up to, so here's the messed up part is if he meets somebody and doesn't tell the ex in the timeline that's written out in the court order, that's technically a violation of a court order. Not that the ex would do it, but the ex could go back and say, hey, on page 3, section 2, it says that you will tell me whenever you have a new girlfriend or if you're hanging around with new friends and you didn't do it, and try to hold you in contempt of court. Yeah, Alone Parent Ire says, the moral of the story is sign nothing unless you're 99.9% agreeable. You have not been snookered, caller, or you have been snookered, caller. However, you can get out of this, be strong. It can be recoverable with a lot of work. Yeah. And okay, so the silver lining on this is, yes, you can change this, but it is going to take a lot more work. Man, I'm sorry, man. I feel bad for you. John says, caller, you are not alone. We've all been through it, and some are still going through it. Hang in there. And yeah, that's true. You know, I mean, it's, see, the difference I had is I was hyper-focused on all of this. And probably because of my profession, I deal with this type of crap, not lawyer-wise, but just from my professional stuff. So I was more focused on it. And to be honest, when my attorney was trying to get me to agree to things, I'm like, no, I'm not going to agree to that. No, absolutely not. And I would push back and I would fight and I would say, no, we're not doing that. We're doing something different. The only one I did concede on is there was one wording that they had put in, my attorney had put in the proposed court order that said something along the lines of a loss of child support does not mean a loss of income for her to ask for an adjustment in alimony. Basically, the short version is that as child support dropped off, she could not come back and ask for an increase in alimony. And the attorney said, well, they don't agree to that. And I lost my mind. I was like, what? And I don't know if I agreed to that one. I mean, ultimately that poll was pulled out because he basically said, look, the way the statutes are here, it doesn't matter. We were trying to put it in there just to make it rock solid, but there's no precedence in California, in our area, that someone has been able to go back after they lost child support and say, well, I was making, $2,000 a month in child support and it's gone now. So now I need more alimony. I need $2,000 in alimony increase. I'm just throwing numbers out there. So that's just an arbitrary example. But I looked at everything. I was talking about that the other day. I was reading when the court order was finally done and it said in summer, I thought initially we were going to do 2 weeks at a time, 2-week blocks. And the court order, or the proposed court order, said 1 week. And I'm like, all right, fine. I didn't want to give her any extra time anyways. I know she wanted it. Okay, I'll agree to that. I didn't go, I mean, I guess I could have said, hey, in our discussion, it wasn't 1 week, it was 2 weeks. I didn't do that. I'm like, well, okay. She didn't read it, which actually in retrospect, maybe I should have had them. Well, no, I'm trying to think, because they did read the other part of it, but they didn't catch that. But then again, I didn't catch the holidays, the other holidays, the main holidays, Christmas, New Year's. Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Halloween, 4th of July, and spring break. Those were listed, but all the other holidays weren't listed. So I didn't get any of the first 3-day weekends for like the first, 4 or 5 years, until the calendar switched to where the holidays started falling on my weekends. So, man, that was a tough call. I mean, here's the thing, guys. Even if you do make a mistake, you are not, how am I trying to say this? There's still ways out of it. It just makes it harder, right? Your best scenario is to get everything up front that you possibly can. To try to get everything written out as much time as possible. I mean, if you have young kids and they're saying, oh, but they're so young, then have it written in there saying, okay, when they start school, this is what the schedule will be, and put it in there. Now, probably your attorney's not going to want to do that because they would much rather you come back and pay them another retainer and go back to court to do that. If you can communicate, then you can go to a mediation and have, just modify your thing or do a mediated or a stipulated agreement. But anyways, oh my God. Let me see what some of the comments are. I'm kind of bummed at that one though, to be honest. A lone parent IR says the term "the best interest of the child within the courts" is wishy-washy terminology, and it helps no one, not even the child. Yeah, it's super subjective. Because if someone says, well, because someone can turn around and say, okay, well, one parent is toxic, but they have primary custody. So for the best interest of the child, because it's stable and they don't have to see the conflict, we'll just agree and let the bad person, so to speak, have full custody and wipe the other person out. That's the problem is that if you can turn around and in the best interest doctrine, if that's your methodology, then in a lot of ways, okay, fine. How do you argue that? I mean, I'm not saying that to try to irritate anybody or have someone have a emotional flashback, but that is the reality. Oh, I like that. Marson says, is this question, do screenshots count as evidence of the new supply interfering? It's been 2 years since she came into the picture. It's been a nightmare. Yeah. I mean, I double check with your attorney, but I mean, if you have evidence that shows patterns of behavior or toxic behavior, then yeah. I mean, it's amazing how much people put on text. It's like, why in the world aren't people looking at it thinking a judge might see this and how is it going to make them look? I mean, not that you should be doing things for appearances, but oh my God. I mean, even if you are a narcissistic person and you live in illusions, you would think that they wouldn't do that. And the sad part is sometimes a narcissistic toxic person will poke someone in, poke someone in an eye, hoping that they will lash out via text so they can do that screen capture and say, look at this. I just asked for, their book, little Timmy's book, and this is what I have to deal with. Guys, be very careful when you hit send. Double check what you're saying. Marcin goes on to say, well, what if you have a judge that is pro-dad, but dad is the narcissistic abuser here who has the lawyer and looks good on paper? Well, here's the thing, and this goes back to what we were talking about before. It's all about perception and believability. If you have a judge it doesn't matter. If you walk in and they're biased against you, then that means you have a more of an uphill battle to make your point. You just have to focus in on patterns of behavior. I mean, the same thing that if you're in a situation where it's a pro-mom judge and they just assume that the mom should have the kids all the time and the mom is the narcissistic person, you have to focus on patterns of behavior. And the flip side to it is then what you need to do is you need to, if they rule against you, that you need them to do it in a way that you can appeal it, because so that their decision is based on a misinterpretation of statute and law. If you watch Alex's channel, I mean, that's one of the key things he talks about quite often is getting a judge to make a judgment on something that is appealable because they didn't read the law correctly. Guys, you have to, and again, just because we think that our ex is toxic or we think that our ex is narcissistic, you can't just go in and say, well, my ex is a narcissist, and just expect everyone's going to go, oh my God, the term has been used. This person has been painted with that picture, and that is what they are. Doesn't work. Most of the time, it doesn't work that way. Most of the time, it'll actually hurt you, and they'll be like, oh, okay, we're dealing with one of these type of people. So, yeah, I agree with Techmore. Techmore says that's why a rebuttal presumption of 50-50 is ideal. Yeah, I mean, I think the reason is because then you walk in, everyone has equal access to the kids, instead of this normal, like, well, I've decided that you are a bad person, and to protect my child, you don't get to see them. And now you're going to have to fight tooth and nail to try to crawl or claw any moment that you can possibly get. I know a lot of people are freaked out about 50-50, but the problem with toxic people is typically they'll use that as the bargaining chip. But here's the reality of the rebuttable presumption of 50-50. What that means is if you walked in, if you decided tomorrow and everything's fine, you say, you know what? We're getting a divorce, I'm filing it tomorrow, or it's been filed, you've been served, then they don't have any time to do anything, then 50-50 presumption of 50-50 would work. You flip that around and that person plans on it so that they start setting you up, they push your buttons, they get some domestic violence stuff in there, they get a pattern, so when they walk into court, they go, okay, rebuttable presumption of 50-50, what's the deal? Oh, well, he's been arrested, or they've been arrested 3 times, we have domestic violence issues, and here's evidence that they beat their children and do whatever. Well, then you're screwed. So I mean, in a lot of ways, the only benefit would be, like in my situation, because everything happened so fast, it would have been 50. When I went in for that first hearing, it would have been 50-50. I'm like, all right, fine. There's no real evidence. All it is people throwing dirt against the wall, but there's no pending cases or anything. But the problem is that, maybe in my situation, the ex would have pushed it and would have called the cops and would have tried to say, oh my God, I did something. And that's why the divorce has been filed, because this, it's finally reached a bubbling point. A lot of people think that this presumption of 50-50 is going to be I'm almost out of time. So we'll continue this tomorrow. Sorry, guys. Dang, I wasn't paying attention to the time. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out this Monday. I know the call was long, but I think it was some good information. I do want to say thank you to all the channel members who so graciously click the button and are supporters of the channel. They're scrolling on the screen right now. Thank you. You help make all this happen. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys here tomorrow.